Alrighty, folks, welcome back to the Mushing Alaska Iditarod coverage. We're excited to kind of get going and start talking about the actual race. Yesterday, Saturday, was the ceremonial start, and I think that's probably a super fun event to be a part of what for both the mushers and also the fans. But I feel like the race actually really started today, and so. We just kind of start talking about that a little bit. But, Sean, with you having experienced the true start of the race being what happened today and the ceremonial, can you just tell us more about that experience? Like what's that like? What's it like to be a part of?
Yeah, I mean, the ceremonial is funny. There's just like a lot going on with the ceremonial because you spend the week leading up to the Iditarod is you're just tinkering with things that are probably not going to make or break your race, but then the list of little things to tinker with is just it gets bigger and bigger. You're like, oh crap, I need to make a bunch of extra necklines and tug lines, and oh, I need a couple extra harnesses, and oh wait, I need my runner plastic. I want to put that, and these things start to add up, and then you got this ceremonial start that doesn't even count as part of the race, and you're like, I don't want to do this. Like I got shit to do. The race is tomorrow, so. And then you get into it, and you're there at the race, and you're like, actually, this is pretty fun. The people are there; they're excited. It's like you're downtown Anchorage. There's just a party, and then you get done with that, and you're like, all right, game face back on. All right, we got to get all the dogs loaded up into the dog trucks. They have different setups, and we're gonna drive from Anchorage up to Willow, which is about an hour and a half drive. A lot of people make that drive this morning because the race doesn't start until 2 p.m. and it's only an hour and a half drive. So it's a lot of times that's what we did. We drove in the morning, 8 or 9 in the morning, towards Willow. And there's some traffic, um, and and that's rare here in Alaska that you get traffic. But yeah, getting to the restart, there's some fans that are still there. Yeah, just not as many because Willow's a very small town. It's some people wouldn't even call it a town. It's just a long stretch of highway where people live. So uh, and then you start to get your game face on. Everything that you're putting in your sled, it's like 5% of what you need for the race. You've already sent out the other 95% of your food and gear a month ago. So, you just putting on got your winter boots, you got your extra pair of booties for the dogs, you got an extra harness, all your dog jackets are in there. Dogs have jackets they wear when it gets colder, or maybe if it's windy conditions. And you're just kind of packing up your sled. It's not that much, but you just kind of don't want to forget that one thing that you need. Your cooler of food. You need a ladle to be able to scoop the dog food out. And that would be a real bummer if you didn't have the ladle. It's just like having these things is essential, and how monumental this task is of 1,000 miles across the wilderness of Alaska through the dead of winter kind of starts to hit you. And some people handle it with composure, and some people it's can get like really emotional because you're just like, holy shit, I just spent like the last 7 years of my life preparing for this one moment, and then you finally get yourself to the start line. They start counting down that number, and you pull the hook, and immediately, once you start moving, it's just this relief of like, oh, okay, well, whatever's in my sled, I'm gonna have to make do with it. Now I can just do what I love doing: run some dogs and relax and take a deep breath. Because all the preparation of that is, it's like preparing for a 10-day vacation. You just like, I don't know if I packed too much or I packed too little. I had stuff just blowing out of my sled. I had way too much shit, and the more experienced people you see, the more minimalistic, So yeah, it's here. It started. It's real. This is legit.
It's
So here's a
here.
little extra.
It's here. It started. Sean is literally stoked. Like I
Dude,
think
I'm
the
sorry.
level is higher than I'm prepared for right now. It's strong, my guy. I love it. Um, so let's just kind of like talk about the transition from doing the ceremonial to Willow. I imagine getting 33 mushers and their teams lined up for a ceremonial, and then they do what's like 10 miles or something like that. Is that correct? Okay, so 10
Yes.
miles, right? And then you got to pack them up and drive them. What's that drive if you're lucky with no traffic? That's what, 2 hours?
Hour and a half.
Hour and a half from Anchorage up to Willow, right? And then like, is that something, do are the mushers staying overnight in Anchorage? Are they
Yeah.
going to Willow? Is it depend on the person? Like, what is the strategy there? You know?
Yeah, I mean, this is where there's like small advantages and disadvantages. Like Brent Sass, defending Iditarod champion, this isn't going to affect him, but he lives like 3 hours away from Fairbanks. It's like a 9 hours from Anchorage. Okay, uh, he is not going home Saturday night. He's chilling in Anchorage. He's driving to Willow Sunday morning, and unless he has like a friend that puts him up in you know Saturday night in Willow. But when I worked for Jeff, we would stay in Anchorage because he lives in Denali. That's 4 hours away. You can't go all the way back there. So you stay in Anchorage. But then I worked for Dallas, and he lives just near Willow in Talkeetna. So we would drive back to Talkeetna, be home for that night. It's kind of nice to be home, and then you drive to Willow in the morning. It's like 45 minutes away or whatever. So it just kind of depends on what your situation is. Sometimes people that live far away uh, might stay at another musher's house that is in Willow, because there's Willow's the capital of mushing globally. There's just the most mushers anywhere on the planet are in Willow. So most of them aren't running the Iditarod. So they might have a little space to, hey, come on in. If you need to unpack your sled, make some last minute adjustments, you can stay at my house. So yeah.
So
And then
ultimately,
go ahead.
so ultimately it's case by case. And
Yeah.
so if you live around Willow or you know someone around there, maybe you get to go up there earlier. Otherwise, you traveled up to Willow today.
Yes, in the morning, and you hope that there's not a bunch of traffic, and that can wreck someone's morning. Like the year I went, there was a massive, like some car turned over in the middle of the highway. My mom, our mom, uh, was like in the car, just like in traffic for 4 or 5 hours, not moving
Gosh,
with Uncle Brad and Aunt Kay, and they barely made it, and I was, a mess by the time that mom showed up. So a lot of the fans that don't leave at 8 in the morning, they sometimes you can end up missing it if there's and there happen to be some fresh snow on the road or whatever. And I want to get to like the first day of the race, right? That's kind of the next. Here we are. We're at the first day. It's 7:05 as we're recording this in Alaska. They started the race. The first musher leaves at 2.
P.S.
Okay.
11 o'clock at night in Atlanta. For those of you
Shout
who
out
care, shout out
to
to the
Brendan who's staying
dedication.
up.
Let's go, A Town. Let's
Uh,
go. Sorry.
also 1 year old father of a 1 year old. Anyways, um, so the the
We're
2
getting
minute
into the
intervals
race.
are important. Like
Yep.
that's firstly you get everyone has a bib number. The bib number is your starting position. I guess bib number one is like the symbolic bib, and this year it represents R.I.P. the goat Lance Mackey, who passed away this year. 4-time Iditarod champion. That's bib number one represents him. So the true first bib number is bib number two, and then you got 30 something mushers behind them, and you start in those 2 minute intervals. But when the first musher leaves, the clock starts for every single musher. And so, yeah, if you leave 30th, you left an hour after the first musher. But don't worry, there's a mandatory 24-hour rest that you can elect to choose at any of the checkpoints along the way. And at the end of the 24 hours, they also tack on the difference in that start time. So the person that left first has to wait an extra hour, uh, and at the end of their 24-hour rest. So don't be confused. It's not all the teams blast off at once, but there are races like that. And then there's the strategy of this first third of the race.
All right,
And
hold
look,
on. Pause for me real quick.
yeah,
So I want to talk about the order, right? So in our most recent podcast, Sean kind of talked a little bit more about like, does it matter what order you get picked in? And obviously, as he just explained, like if you If you go first, when you have your mandatory 24 hours, you're going to make up for that on the back end. So they're going to hold you longer than your 24 hours. They're going to add on that extra time. There's 33 mushers at 2 minute intervals, so 66 minutes. They have to make up that time. So, like, what is your opinion, or maybe others' opinions? Does it even really matter since it is kind of set up to be equal? Like, does someone want to prefer to be going first where it's like fresh powder, right? The trail is not had any mushers on it at that point yet, versus being one of the last numbers and having to go after all 32, or just like made all those ruts and stuff? You're like, what?
On a Yeah, on a day like today, it's not a huge thing. I mean, it really never is a big deal. It is truly meant to be equal. But look, if you're someone trying to win the Iditarod, you'd probably rather just be out in front and not have to pass all the teams that whose goals aren't to win the Iditarod. There's so many teams in this race that are just out there to get their personal best time, get to the finish line, get that damn belt buckle. So if you're trying to win, you'd rather start in front, but it's not a big deal if you start last and you're trying to win. You'll pass the teams; it'll mostly go fine. This section of trail is super wide and heavily trafficked. There's people out in the first 40 miles of the trail. There's airplanes landing on this river. There's snow machines out there driving, tailgating. There's parties going on down the river. People have their like summer and winter home getaways on alongside the river, so you just hear the parties off in the distance. You see the bonfires happening, people pass you a hot dog, right? So the trail's heavily trafficked whether you're first or you're last. There's it does get a little rutted out towards the end, but I mean, by the time you're a couple miles into this race, and on a day like today when there's no fresh snow, really cold, not really cold, but pretty cold for the area. It was like below zero this morning in Anchorage, which means it was probably 10 or 15 below zero in Willow. And, so hard, fast trails. And, but let's say if it's dumped 2 feet of snow last night and you go out on the trail first, you might be doing a little extra work. And if you go on the trail last, well, you just had 30 teams in front of you that kind of blew open the trail a little bit, and maybe it's a little bit easier going. But it's everything's of small consequence and minor inconvenience if it does affect you adversely at all.
Got you. Okay. And so at the time of this recording right now, Brent Sass is already in the lead. So, he was the number 14 bib, and almost middle of the pack, not quite. And he's already made a significant jump all the way to first. And Ryan Reddington is just a mile or so behind him. So, it's at this point it's still very close. But they're all at this point leading up to Squintna. And so, like, when are we going to start seeing some breaks? Yentna was the first stop. I imagine that some people are stopping there. That maybe that's more of the rookies or some of the folks that are just trying to get to the finish line. For competitive folks, they're probably powering through that stop, right?
Yeah, Vienna Station, really no one stops there. It's only 30 miles into the race. Look, if you stop your dog team after 30 miles, they're trained to run 1,000 miles in 9 days. You stop after 30 miles, they're not gonna sleep. So there's no point in stopping. You might as well run them enough to get them a little bit tired. And then, most of these competitive teams will be going to Squinta. Now, Brent Sass, we know exactly what he's going to do. He ain't stopping in Squinta. He's camping before or he's camping after, but the man will not stop at a checkpoint unless he has to. He likes the quiet trail, and there's something to be said for it. Look, you're on the trail. You don't have a bunch of volunteers asking you this and race checkers asking you that and other mushers. Hey, Brent, do you think, what do you think of that one section? You're just out there right alone with your dogs. Everything's more efficient. The dogs get better rest. The only bad part about it is maybe those hot meals that the people at the checkpoint are offering. You might not get those, or you can't go sleep inside of the lodge. You got to sleep on the side of the trail. But Brent, he loves sleeping on the side of the trail. I see most of these guys. Yetna Station, just want to say, isn't really much of a checkpoint. It's just kind of like they got a stack of. They don't even send out you don't even send out your stuff to get in the station. They just pretty much got straw and fuel and a veterinarian there, and then you just continue on. And then at Squentna, that's a lodge that people go to vacation at, but they use it for literally just one day for the Iditarod, and you do send out your food and you send out your dog gear and your human food and human gear to Squentna as the first checkpoint in which you'll do that. But yeah, the Squentna is what, like, how many miles from the start line?
Squentna is about 62 miles, I believe, if my
So
math's
six
right.
like 62 miles is like on the upper end of like how much you want to run your dogs at once. And this is where you get into the debate and to where when you learn about mushing, there's a lot of right ways to do it and you just want to run the dog team in front of you, right? You don't want to worry about what other people are doing. But 62 miles is a pretty long distance. Some people like Dallas, he would probably be camping before Squintna, uh, going something like 40 to 50 miles, do a 2 or 3 hour camp, and then continue on. You're going to see most of the people stopping in Squentna. I'm interested to see what Brent does. Is he going to go through Squentna or is he kind of camp right before Squentna? But look, the first day of the race, second day of the race, you can't win the race on day one or day two. But you know what you can do, Brendan? You can lose it. You can lose the race on day one. You can lose the race on day two. This is back to there's a lot of right ways to do it. There's a lot of mushers with a lot of different opinions on this subject. But what's the right speed to go with your dog team who's just taken 3 days off, 4 days off, 5 days off of minimal running? They're in peak physical condition. They're super stoked. They want to go. Trust me, these guys running 10, 9 miles an hour, they're on the brake the whole time, trying to make sure they don't go too fast, right? You can't be going 15 miles an hour. It is not sustainable. That we can all agree on. We can also agree that if you're braking a team that is going, let's say they want to go 15 miles an hour, you're slowing them down to 7 miles an hour. That's too much braking. So you want to find that middle ground for your dog team. And for Brent, it looks like it's at 10.8 miles an hour. That's that's pushing it. You don't you don't want to be going over 11 miles an hour for very long. But they've been going. He's as I said that it updates. He's going 11 miles an hour. Ryan Ranson's going 10.8. That's right on that line. But he knows his dogs. How many times has this guy run the Iditarod? You think he knows what he's doing, but when you look at Brent Sass's history, he's his own worst enemy, right? If he ends up if blowing this race, which he's the by far the favorite to win, it's going to be because he got in his own way. And so, we got to watch those speeds with Brent. We'll see how, if that's something that you won't see the consequences of until 3 days later. But uh, you got to watch those speeds, and they're on the upper end, and I think look, they're competing to win it, and you got that line is something that you're always kind of navigating around. It's just go as fast as you can. Eventually, you get to day three, you're not on the brake anymore. The dogs have calmed down, they're subdued, they've ran a couple 100 miles, they're chilling. You don't need to be on the brake. You're going 8 or 9 or 10 miles an hour without being on the brake, but right now, yeah, that speed management, that energy management, it's important. And how are you going to do that schedule? You don't want to run too far. You've seen these people in the past run 80 miles right from the start line. 100% of the time, that will ruin your competitive race. You can't be going over 65 miles on the first run. It's the super bold and pretty risky. So you want to watch those distances. Who's going on that really long run past 65 miles. That's that magic number. I would bet that if someone runs over 65 miles straight from the start line, they're not winning the Iditarod.
Oh, hot take number one of many to
There's
come.
going to be
I'm
so many.
excited. We're gonna have so many. We need to like keep count of who says what and what actually happens versus not happening. But it's an exciting time, and we're just gonna be trying to give you as much detail as we can. We're following all the different kennels. We both have subscriptions to the Iditarod Insider. And one thing I do want to just address, right, is the fact like we're using Google Earth right now for the map. It's kind of out of respect to the website. Like, just in order to access the GPS, you have to create an account, you have to pay for it. So, for us, it's just something like Sean's been a part of the Iditarod. Shout out 2021, bib number 47, belt buckle baby. Um, and we have tons of love and respect for the Iditarod. So again, we're not trying to be like competition to them. We're just trying to kind of be supplementing as well. And so, I mean, we'll talk about different things that we hear and read and such, but I think out of respect for them, we will just kind of use our own map, and we can kind of talk about the terrain and different things like that. We'll definitely make sure we're putting up some fun pictures. If you're not following these people on Facebook and in Instagram, you should be. And we'll talk about some fun stuff like that. I saw a cool video of Brent taking off earlier. We'll make sure to kind of start showing some things like that as well. Sean, do you have anything to add before we kind of wrap things up?
Yeah, I mean the Iditarod website has a $40 or $39.95 subscription, and you get to see the GPS trackers on every sled. So I'm looking at it right now. Brent Sass is going 11 miles an hour. He's at, you know, uh, if you can see what mile he's at. You can see when it last updated because they don't update every second, right? They update every few minutes. So that's just the GPS tracker. That's really the easiest way to follow the race. Then you have the sign in and sign out times at each checkpoint. So this is what I'm going to be looking at. Brent signed in at this time and he stayed at the checkpoint for 3 hours, or he just signed out 5 minutes later. That means, okay, he blew through the checkpoint. He picked up the straw, picked up the dog food, and he kept going. So you can see a lot of this information. And then, of course, the Iditarod insiders, led by Greg Heister, Bruce Lee, and Liz Failer. They're going to be at
Shout out.
checkpoints interviewing mushers, filming the dogs, getting as much information as they possibly can. But look, they're just three of them, and a cameraman or two. They only can do so much, right? So we're here to help analyze this information. But you really, if you're any interest at following the Iditarod, dude, you gotta drop $39.95 on this Iditarod website, dude. It's money. It's the best content of any sled dog race on the planet is gonna be Iditarod's website. So you gotta go check it out.
So before we leave, I want to get a prediction, or just, we're gonna do our next recording in about 12 hours from now, and a lot can happen. 12 hours, that could be another, what will probably be hunt the Brent or whoever's in the lead will be 125 to 150 miles in at that point. What's your
So I'm thinking, let's see, 7:20. He's gonna be resting by 10 at the latest. Uh, he's gonna take a 3-4 hour rest. So then we're talking 1 a.m. I'm gonna be up at 6. Yeah, I think he's gonna be not quite to. Maybe he'll be right around Finger Lake, I would say.
Okay, nice.
Brent and whoever else is in the leader of the pack. You probably see Ryan Reddington up there, Jesse Holmes, those guys. Uh, Ryan Reddington and Brent Sass. They're always been the kind of guys that like to get to first place immediately and stay there. And then you got these back of the Packers that are building them, as Dallas says, building the monster. All right, and getting that team nice and into the form of the race and get them in the rhythm of things, and then they make their move middle of the race and the end of the race. So you're going to see some of those people that finish top five that aren't anywhere near top five right now.
Nice. Awesome. Well, also, one thing I did want to kind of just fill in the blanks for those of you who don't really know too much of Sean's backstory. He's referred to Jeff and Dallas a few times. So,
Yep,
if you're familiar with the
sir.
world of mushing, you know who these people are. But Sean first got introduced to mushing, and he was working with Jeff King, who's four-time Iditarod winner. And then he was there. How long were you there for? What was that, 3 years or so?
Yeah, I'd say like 4 years probably.
And then he made a transition over to working with Dallas Seavey, and Dallas Seavey is also a four-time Iditarod champion. And so,
Five.
just oh, whoa, 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 Dallas, forgive me, sir.
Yep.
Um, but just so you're aware, if you ever hear Sean kind of talking about stories related to Jeff or Dallas, and he doesn't finish that last name, that's who he's referring to. And I just, you know, feel like it's important to kind of fill in the blanks
Thank you.
there. Yes, yes. Anything else that you want to add, man, before we cut this off?
No, I think we're good. Maybe if you ever looking at the GPS trackers and it says someone's resting, sometimes sometimes GPS trackers are finicky and it might say they're resting but they're not, or maybe they are it says they're moving but they're resting. You know, but yeah, that's small detail. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.